Ladies and gentlemen, coming up is a ministerial discussion on the launch of the UAE's National CCI Strategy. Please welcome to the stage your moderator, Mina Al-Uraibi, Editor-in-Chief of the National. And joining her are His Excellency Abdullah bin Tawq al-Marri, UAE Minister of Economy, Her Excellency Noura bint Mohammed al-Ka'bi, UAE Minister of Culture and Youth. And joining virtually is His Excellency Dr. Ahmed bin Abdullah bin Hol al-Falasi, Minister of State for Entrepreneurship and SMEs.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a delight to be here. We have an important discussion today about the UAE's national strategy that was only launched recently for CCI. But before we begin our discussion, we have a video here that will give us a brief about the strategy. Your Excellency, Minister Noura, I'd like to start with you because the strategy is very ambitious, 10-year strategy, multi-pillar, and looking at 40 different strategic initiatives. So could you explain to us the sectorial pillars for this strategy?
Thank you, Mina. So, number one, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us and waiting for His Excellency to be with us virtually, I hope. Of course, we are here celebrating a conference that is, having the creatives and the strategy of creatives at the center stage. So we announced the national strategy for cultural and creative industries, and it has very important main 6 pillars that encompasses natural and cultural heritage, audiovisual and interactive media, books and press, design, creative services, and celebrations. And I think those 6 pillars do as well have subsectors to more than 25 that as well trickles to 90 domains. I mean, that work by itself, going to those numbers, it was a work with the collaborative work with governmental agencies, private agencies as well, individuals, SMEs, lots of brainstorming. And I have to take you back to 2018 under the beautiful dome of the Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, where we had one of the retreats to talk about the future of cultural sustainability and contribution to the economic sphere. And there was an announcement by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid saying, okay, it's time to change the narrative here. It's time to look at create cultural and creative industries as one of the pillars, which made us also have a sector that is only looking into this, looking into the legislative framework, looking in terms of such a collaboration as mentioned with our partners.
So can I ask you, you've taken a deep dive, come up with the strategy. What does success look like in 10 years' time? If we're going to sit together, inshallah, in 10 years and say, we've succeeded, what does it look like?
Okay. So I hope we're sitting in a more relaxed atmosphere in 10 years. Well, with our partners in the Ministry of Economy, we looked in terms of the importance of diversifying quantifying the economy and what is the contribution. Okay, of course, there will be an indexes and a way of a statistical way to measure it and see the impact. So far, it's 2.5. We're aiming to increase it by 5% in 10 years. And I think that by itself will help us take the cultural and creative industries to the top 10 performing economic pillars within the country. It's fast, it's growing, and we know it's growing, specifically with the creatives, with the majority of it being the freelancers and the SMEs. So that gives it a push for such a speed that I just mentioned.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Well, as you said, the Ministry of Economy will have an integral part in making this happen. So, Your Excellency, Minister Abdullah, I want to ask you, what are the economic policies that you're implementing to support this strategy so we can get to that 10-year success mark?
First of all, thank you, Mina, and thank you, Her Excellency Noura, for having me here today on stage. This is an excellent opportunity to really talk to different minds of creativity. I'm usually talking to manufacturers, retailers, traders, but creative economy is one of the most important parts of any nation. And I think what takes us back this year and really last year is the importance, how important creative economy into our aspects. Her Excellency mentioned the 5% in the next 10 years, which is a huge success for the UAE to reach that. And I think what's really important and vital for us in the UAE as well is to look at how do we look at the creative economy as a place for the UAE to diversify its economy. And the most important thing, that's creative economy is not just looked at as a traditional economy, but as well it's an expression of human minds. It's an imagination that a nation brings to the world. It's something that you deliver something on a different level, a talk, a conversation. You elevate the intellectual capital of the UAE and the cultural contribution to the world. So when you see what the UAE is just providing to the world, it's not just exports and imports. You are providing minds, thoughts, imaginations, cultural thinking that will bring above all the creative economy into the UAE. And when we look at that, what type of policies that the UAE is looking at, let's take it from different aspects. And I think the major ones is how can we look at the laws that really help the ecosystem works on. And I think the important part is the two things. And before doing that, we need to look at the creative economy from two different areas: infrastructure and ownership. And when you look at the infrastructure part, we understand that there are many hard infrastructure that's available. There are about 20 free zones for creative economy from 2454 from Dubai Media City, Sharjah Media City, and you can find a lot. You have the Louvre Museum, you have the Sharjah Khorfakan Amphitheater happening. You have the infrastructure is ready. But what does really we understand from the creative economy they need is ownership. How do they own their copyrights, their thinking? So from that, there was a lot of policy enablers that really came into place. We looked at the last 18 months on many of these legal reforms, and have you seen, we started the reforms from the commercial and company laws, and then doing business, reducing the cost, and looking at attracting more FDI into it. But the key aspect to this is how can we look at creative economy as part of our trade? And with these policies, where you have today an infrastructure which is ready to receive, you have the right legal framework for ownership and aspect of that, then you allow people to do. Then the cherry comes on the top. Very recently, the UAE launched the freelance visa. And the freelance visa reform that happens to be is dedicated for the creative economy industry. And that's by itself is an important part to attract talent. People can come in. And what does it entail, the freelance visa? It entails that you can actually have a permanent residency in the country. You don't need a sponsor or you need to work in a company. You're gonna get you can open a bank account. You can have a SIM card. You can actually live, go, come, and be a freelancer in the creative economy that the UAE sees. So the infrastructure, the ownership, and the cherry on the top, the freelance visa.
It's interesting because what you're referring to are very specific measures that are being taken at a time when most people from the outside that look at the creative industry think, oh no, just create a hub where people can physically work and that's it. But that's all the soft infrastructure and the tangible regulations. But I wanted to ask you about the implementation of this strategy. And you mentioned the reforms, and you also mentioned the issue of legislation. So could you tell us a bit more about what the ministry is doing specifically on that? Because I think for the creatives here and those who are tuning in online, they'd be quite interested to know about those specifics.
Sure. There are two major initiatives to help the implementation of the national strategy of the CCI. One of them, which we'd like to announce today here, is the announcement of the collective management organization. It's a global market size that we looked at, and we said, how can the UAE today create its own collective management organizations that can help creative industry to flourish from that? The other one is, we have recently changed through the president of the UAE, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed, launching the couple of sets of laws that was launched a couple of weeks ago. Two major important ones are the trademark law and the copyrights and the neighboring law. And these laws that really entails has a lot of representation for the creative industries. We added a lot to it, and I think the most important to really announce today is the trademark and the copyright of the creative industries are going to look at smell, sound, holograms, tones, and other types of creative industries traditional marks, as well as going to give the trademark, if it finishes, 6 months leeway for renewing it as well. And if you want another 6 months and you have an excuse for that, you can have another year to renew the trademark. So we have agiled that and made it more softer for the creative industries to protect their rights and have the protection on it. As well, we added the geographical indicators, which is used on products that have specific geographical origins, as well the aspects of multi-category process as well to it. This issuance of this new law comes as well with the Madrid Protocol that we signed, and that will come in the effect of the 28th of December of this year. So all of these changes of laws and regulations that really helps the strategy to really go forward came and entailed in the last law that was launched, and I'm announcing it today here on stage to really explain that the creative industry today, UAE is a place for you to look at where infrastructure is there and regulations are for you there, and the freelance visa to help.
That's fascinating, especially the issues of copyright and trademark. It's a challenge, I believe, in the region, but also globally with all the changes that are happening. Unfortunately, we're having some technological difficulties of bringing in Dr. Ahmed, so I'm going to turn to you, Your Excellency, to comment on this, particularly the trademark, the CMO, and the copyright laws coming into place, and the Madrid Protocol, again, being effective as of the end of this month. What does that mean, and what sign does that give to creatives that are looking at the UAE as a hub, but also a place where they can flourish?
Well, I consider this a major announcement. I consider having the collective management, organization in terms of how we protect the creatives, how we look into IP, how we make the journey a smooth journey for them to understand. Or we're going to start with an awareness campaign together. What are your rights as creatives? From IP protection, from payment. We're in the previous session with Sheikh Zain talking about creatives who are participating in terms of creative work, and they end up not being paid. And there's another challenge as well, where unfortunately some of the bigger organizations look at those freelancers and then dictate the payment, let's say a rate card, which can be peanuts to whatever the contract is. So for us, we have lots of work to do, which starts from a simple idea that is a creative idea that needs to be protective. So the legislative framework that His Excellency mentioned, this is the base of how can we attract more work to be created in the UAE. Talents, as mentioned, from the freelance visa to the golden visa as well. The moment you attract talents, you need to respect their rights. And after that, it's as well looking into more of let's say, the strategic dimensions that we're working on at the Ministry of Culture and Youth. We worked, on 40 initiatives, and those initiatives are are focused on three main pillars, which are education, talent education. So when we talk about talent education, from early childhood education to high school, we need to embed what culture is and what creative industry is and how it's a part of your livelihood and it's a future job instead of the classical sectors that we know of 10 years ago. And again, the business environment. And that's why if the Ministry of Culture doing it by itself with the creative, it's not going to work. So having our Minister of Economy, the Ministry of Economy, looking into that and looking into how can we embed the legislative framework and speak the language that creatives understand. I mean, this is where this language has to be a language that everyone understands and everyone is able to connect with and work towards. So I think, and the business environments, the enabling the business environment and the education as well are a strong pillar. Unfortunately, His Excellency Ahmed Bilhol won't be able to join us, but this is where my point of mentioning with the SMEs and the small businesses and the freelancers. And I just want to mention a very quick story, and I think me and His Excellency are taking Ahmed's minute, so let's enjoy that. What really helped us today is the pandemic. I know it was with last year, everything was on pause, creatives didn't know what to do, transforming their businesses into more of a digital services and being agile and being quick and being adaptive. But what helped us is a decision we took, and with the support of the leadership, the cabinet, is how we can support creatives. So the relief fund of creatives shed the light into many challenges that they are facing, whether work-wise or operational-wise. And therefore, the relief fund was established to support them. So it was the first time in the UAE history that we worked together to just transfer money to those individuals and keep at least their business afloat. And after that, we worked on a pulse check because we wanted to know, did that help them? Okay, if it did help them, what did they do? Did they change the status quo? Did they change their business model? Are they less people now, more digital or whatsoever? And there are findings that I feel that are findings that translates how they can operate in the future. So I have to give as well, a thank and a huge credit to the leadership. The moment we presented the relief fund, it was just reallocating a budget that we weren't using because the world stopped. I said, okay, that's a necessity. We are here and we need to support them. And this helped with the strategy and everything that's happening.
So I want to pick up from there, because the idea of the lessons learned from the pandemic, and we've seen incredible response in the UAE and the ability to be agile and adjust, but also plan long term, which is, in addition to your announcement, Your Excellency, this idea of we have the strategy, we have the legislation and so forth. But challenges continue. So I want to ask you about what challenges remain. And I want to start with you, Your Excellency, Minister Abdullah, in terms of what challenges remain and how will you mitigate against them?
I think I'll go back to, I want to sit with the audience and really voice their concerns. And maybe I know a little bit of what their concerns are from above here, and I hope I really answers your challenges. But people, when they look at creative industries, say, how can they actually create companies and make money? But creative industries take time and patience to actually for them to contribute to the economy. The major challenge is how do you balance and how do you allow the creative industries to take a path and explore this in the UAE and not to pressure them to do it fast. I think this is something which is very vital and important, because maybe an artist will take time for his art to really pick up. Maybe it takes time for them to really, people to gauge the creativity that has been created from it. And I think it's important to look at it, not look at it as normal SMEs, but it as a creative SME, and have a different approach in handling them and actually making sure. And it goes back to my first words, they are expressions of human imaginations. So we need to really cherish these human imaginations of the creative industries and allow them to really flourish. I hope I covered a little bit of their challenges, but I think that's something which is very vital. I want to go and really pinpoint on something. The UAE has transformed for the last 50 years. It has transformed from a seaport with big, huge ports to an airports, major airports in the world, to a brain port. UAE looks to the world today, how can we attract creative industries or people or talent as a brain hub, as a brain port to the region. This is how we see the UAE, and the UAE is moving towards humans and the intellectuals and their imagination to attract them here.
That's great. So I love that. Seaports, airports, brain ports, which is part of this, but it's also the non-tangible. So part of your jobs as being members of the cabinet is to make things measurable and tangible and track success, but at the same time allowing for the creative industries that are not always as tangible and measurable. So Your Excellency, what are the challenges you face? But also, what do you think the challenges facing the strategy actually are, and how are you working to resolve them?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where I think part of the main work that we're doing with the launch of the UAE National CCI Strategy is how we measure and how are we consistent in measuring. I don't want to end up being in a meeting with His Excellency saying, Noura, this doesn't make sense. We said 5%, but how are you measuring those 5%? I'm seeing a different X, Y, and Z. Each country has a different way in terms of measuring their CCI, because it has an element of cultural and natural heritage. I mean, let's start with that. And we're different. So you have other countries that have main three sectors. That from their sectors, they're measuring the whole CCI contribution. And from our side, this is where we took our time to identify, as His Excellency mentioned, the number of creative cities that we have and the talents and etc. So we took our time to scan the scene, understand it. The infrastructure is there, connectivity is there, the legislative framework is a work on progress. It never stops. And yet, with those 6 sectors, with more than 25 subsectors, with 90 domains, this is where the team at the Ministry and the Ministry of Economy and our other partners are going to rely on a statistical way with also international agencies such as WIPO, say, okay, this is how the UAE is going to agree on a statistical method and an index to measure CCI. And therefore, the moment this is approved, again, with our stakeholders, the numbers won't be questionable. The numbers. Now, the non-tangible, I'll go back to what happened during the pandemic. This is where we started appreciating art even more. This is where we were, I don't know, how many of you binged on Netflix or whatever it is on and watched and rewatched during the pandemic? I mean, and everything we see here, the camera guy and the beautiful graphics and you, Mina, and everything around us is creative industries. We're here because of creative industries. And I think the way we translate it and the way we explain it to leadership, to our stakeholders, is by giving examples and giving real cases and giving numbers. And I think we've been always doing that, whether it's in the cabinet or even during my previous job in the local sector. I still remember back then in 2454 when we launched more than 10 years ago the film rebate. They're like, why are you giving rebate? Why are you giving cash rebate? And they stopped asking the moment they saw the multiplier effect. The moment they saw Star Wars being filmed in the desert, Dune being filmed in Liwa. So I think it's keep on going, keep on showing examples, conversations, numbers, statistical numbers, but most importantly, this roadmap, this blueprint is going to be our stick and we agree on our stick, and therefore the numbers are going to be translated to a better results, I hope.
So since, unfortunately, Dr. Ahmed is not with us, Minister Abdullah, I'm going to have to turn to you about SMEs specifically. So if you are the owner of a small business or even a medium-sized enterprise that's, got some success but doesn't know where the next steps are, how do the announcements that we've heard today, but also the strategy, encourage them to plan, to transfer perhaps to the UAE? What would be your message specifically to small and medium-sized enterprises in the creative industries?
I think the importance, it's a great, at the moment now, today, to generate income for the youth. Ages from 18, I don't know when does youth ends, but 18 and above.
It doesn't, we're all young here. We're all young here.
But I think there's a lot of jobs opportunities in the creative economy. I think with the strategy today, we're looking at thousands of jobs will be created. With the ecosystems that is in place today, with the infrastructure that there, it's the right time to look at the UAE as a place to really start up, to think about your creativity, to join the creative industry, to look at the jobs opportunities. And I think there's a lot of income for youth to look at this. The UAE has always been a place where it shines for the youth in the region, for the Arab region youth. And I think it's the time to look at the UAE with a place to look at the creative economy as an industry. And there's a lot of creative thoughts and imaginations around us. And I think it's important to look at how can we use that, how can we come in, how can we be part and set up here with the freelance visa, with the legality that's really the laws that protects you even after death for 50 years. Is something that is already in place with signing with the Madrid Protocol, allowing as well the expansions of your copyrights on thinking. Thus allows you with the announcement of the collective management organizations that brings as well the protection and the royalties for your creativity to be collected in the UAE and paid to you directly to it. What the CMO means is the whole thing is if you are putting a music on a flight, that royalties will be collected in the UAE and will be paid to the musician, to the artist. So all the artists, the musician with the CMO today will really be protected for that. And that will really support the SMEs, the individuals, the creativity into it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity from there.
So because you raise a really important point about young people. And so a lot of the planning, and the UAE just celebrated its 50th year, and inshallah planning for the next 50. So part of it is thinking, what are the roadblocks you're putting now? So for people who are now in primary school or kindergarten, when they're old enough to get in, join the economy, they have that ability to go into the creative industry. But for the immediate, there continue to be some, I would say, question marks about, do I want my son, daughter, younger sister, younger brother to go into the creative industry? It's not as clear, a professional path and so forth. So, Your Excellency, what would you respond to that?
So yesterday I was about to convert an engineer who works in an oil company to join us. And I think we did, I'm not sure. So, but he always wanted to. He's a poet, and he always wanted to be in the creative industries. But again, there's this kind of, a task that you get from your parents. Sometimes it's clear, this is your college. Sometimes it's, do whatever you want. And then when the job is there, there's always those hidden kind of hands that pushes you towards your fate or whatsoever. So I believe going back to, and this is the work we're doing with the Ministry of Education, is looking at the early childhood education element, okay? And then looking at the educational element and the high school element, and talking about the university itself. So I'm also working at Zayed University, and in Zayed University, I'm trying to question, what do the students who graduate from the creative industries college, what is their next? What's their job? Are they only artists? Are they graphic designers? But can we call a graphic designer a job? Is it only graphic design? So it takes you to another conversation where we shouldn't look into the the single layer of an education or an industry. We're talking about an economic diversification. We should talk about educational diversification and embedding interdisciplinary. And Mina, you've been also instrumental in helping us also talk about what we are doing in the interdisciplinary studies and anxiety diversity. And therefore, making sure that even an engineer has a creative background, has an artistic background. It's like teaching someone music. So fine, but you might not be a musician, but at least you'll be a good listener. You'll listen, you'll know how to listen. There is those, tangible, and I think the intangible results are mostly more crucial and more important. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but youth here should really eat, breathe, and do everything creative and cultural in their early days in school. And when we're talking about entrepreneurship, I'll give you just an example of the authority of youth. They created something called launchpads, and with those launchpads, the space is there for you for free. Come, show your business, showcase it, provide services. If you go to the Youth Pavilion in Expo, everything is done by youth, from branding, from the programming, from even the interior design. So I think it's as well as the opportunity that you give the youth. So it's a multi-layered approach from the government, from the school, from parents, I hope. Most importantly, it comes first from home. And then later on, focusing on how my first year in university, even if it's in engineering, how as well I can embed more skills into it, that it's softer skills maybe. I'll call them the softer skills and what's happening, because the most beautiful product designs came from engineers, okay, product designs. And that will pose a question: is why didn't it come from engineers? Yes, because there are set of skills they need to get, but what made them creative? And I think this requires us to just to try and find out more in those unique cases.
Can I add something? I'm an engineer.
In defense of engineers.
But there's a book I read for Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill, in his book, he wrote about the creativity. And I learned that Winston Churchill, he's a great politician, great leader, have picked up a brush at the age of 40 and started drawing at the age of 40. Creativity at that time. And in that book, he said, you need to look at your brain as a tree. You have the right side and you have the left side. The right side is your day-to-day job or day-to-day things to do, and the left side is your creativity. How do you grow your left side of your brain? And every one of us, even engineers, should have creativity into them. And I think it's important to really nourish this in our youth and our kids, to really bring this kind of creative out of them and really look at the brain as a tree that has a right and left, and both needs the creativity to really flourish.
That's brilliant. And I think the point that when you hear the Minister of Economy raise that point, as an engineer, it also is to your point about society and perceptions, and that change takes time, but I think it's very important. I wanted to actually reflect on one time I did a management class, and they made us lead a choir, and you had to be the conductor. And the lesson they wanted to give you is that when you are managing a team, they all have their skills that you actually don't have, but as a leader of the choir or the conductor, then you can bring out the best. And I think that's true across the board, but until you get taught that, it's very hard to see. Your Excellency, I wanted to pick up on something you said regarding also young people, because again, so important to get a message out there for creatives who might be at the moment struggling, unsure, and so forth. Knowing their rights knowing what the legislation is, being paid a fair fee for what they're doing and so forth. What advice would you give them? What would you say? How do they know their rights? What they should be doing? Because the infrastructure is here in the UAE, but they may not necessarily know it.
I think the laws that just came out is very important for the creative industry to look at, to read, to understand what their rights are. And I think what the UAE is doing at the moment is we are trying to align our laws with the international protocols to make sure that the protection is not just in the UAE, the protection is globally. And I think that's something which is important. As well, what we need from the youth and the creative industry is to be disruptive. And I think they need to come in with more crazy ideas. The UAE wants to showcase creativity in a way that adds on to the economy. The economy is not a factory alone. It's not trade and retail and stuff. The creative industry, it's what really knits everything into the economy that brings it forward. That's something which it's needed to be disseminated into the youth, the thinking that the creative economy is very vital and important in the UAE's economy. That's why I'm here, that's why I'm sitting, that's why I'm with Her Excellency to really speak about it, because I see it as the most important part. Yes, we're going to do the other things, but this is very vital. This will bring the brain port, this will bring the people, the talent that you would need to grow any economy. And today, some people say the fuel for economy is data. I say the fuel for economy is talent. We need more talent, we need more creativity, we need more disruption.
Your Excellency, the same question to you in terms of, especially for young creatives, and there are all these changes, the strategy has been announced, but they may not understand how that connects to them directly. It may seem very top level. How do you make it more directly impacting them?
Well, I know exactly how it feels. I mean, how will they connect directly? It's not by maybe understanding the strategy. They shouldn't understand the strategy. It's not their job. If you want to read it, read the strategy.
Read it in the National, we've covered it, we've broken it down.
Yeah. I think it's how we dissect the strategy and make it a language that is very simple from a very early age. In school, how would I get a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old to nurture? How can I nurture a talent and make them understand talent, creativity, culture, heritage? I don't know. It's understanding the sector, and I think later on is when, of course, when they're in a school, or let's say in a university, it will all depend on how is this base of understanding what is the creative industries. They see it around them. Creative industries has been here in the UAE before the strategy. Okay, with the creative cities, with the media cities, with the book fairs, with our work with the UNESCO in terms of the tangible and intangible heritage, our culture, our identity. It's all around us. What we wanted to do is we said we want to have a strategy. Why do we want to have a strategy? Is because this strategy will entail into a measurement. What will this measurement do? It will help you when you're interested about the economy, when you're interested about growing your own business. That is the age when they will understand, okay, you're interested to know, you have the idea, and you're protecting the idea, and you don't want anyone to know about this idea. This is where, yes, I'm going to go and check how it is from an IP protection, from registering such an IP or whatever it is. So it will come with a need of a job or an idea or whatever it is. But our job is to make it as part of a living, part of a studying, okay, and never have it this rigid in the way we explain it to youth, because they will appreciate elements of it. And I hope it will enable them. Our job is to enable them. Our job is to enable a freelancer who is, genius in filmmaking, to create his own film company or production. And from there, export, as His Excellency mentioned. It will go out. How will the products will transcend beyond the borders of the UAE? And then will take us to another discussion, you know, the UAE brand or the Emirati product that is going out there. And it's part of the strategy as well. You know, with the young ones, enjoy what you're doing, enjoy the talent, enjoy capturing pictures, painting, filming, celebrations, books, being a publisher, but you need to know your right. You need to know how to protect it, and you need to know how to nourish it. As simple as that. And our job is to set or lay the tracks of how this can be a successful journey.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you both one final question. Thank you for all your insights. And again, we wish Dr. Ahmed was with us because there was a lot we wanted to also ask him about entrepreneurs, but I think you've done a great job representing SMEs and entrepreneurship. But my question to you is this. In this year and a half, 2 years of pandemic, a lot of change, planning for the future and so forth, what's one thing you've learned that surprised you, that you didn't know before, and that has helped to impact the direction we're going when it comes to the creative industries here in the UAE?
One thing is, I've learned that we hear that in the dictionary of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum and his vision that the word impossible doesn't exist. And I think my last 18 months working in the cabinet, I found out that the UAE is a land of possibilities. With the launch of the Mars mission, with the Museum of the Future being done, with Expo, we're here, with the management of the COVID-19, the health and the economy of both people and the economy. What I learned is whatever you have in mind, whatever you want to go out of the box, this is the place for you to actually start. And I think it's a place where you look at it as a possibilities, as a place to really start. You want to be in a place where these things happen. And I want to be there. And that's what I really learned literally for the last 18 months in the pandemic.
Your Excellency.
Well, thank you. Well, I mean, we're colleagues, and we saw how during the pandemic, it has been, the job didn't stop. And I think this is for us where when you have a leadership as it keeps going, I mean, what happens is the scenery just changed from being physical to virtual. And we had our meetings and just setting up those kind of, you know, our flag in the back, and it's like a ministerial meeting. I mean, we were going. And I think the challenge was the worry we had, I personally had, and my team. We worried. We were like, okay, this doesn't seem right, and especially for an industry that has, I don't want to be biased, but creatives are so sensitive. It doesn't mean that engineers are not sensitive.
We're very sensitive.
But, I know. But it's music, it's performance, it's books, it's films, it's storytelling, it's that, and it's a flow, you know, it's like a river, and imagine all of a sudden it stops. So for us, we like, okay, we need to do something, and I think with the help of my team, this is where we said, okay, we need to work on how can we just really said, yeah, but who would accept for you to, you know, to just give cash? I said, no, we're not going to give cash on this. We can't even go to the streets, but it's just. This is for us to say, okay, we're here, we're listening. So I think that was a test. I don't know if we passed the test, but it was a test not to just wait for instructions. And this takes me to my first week in my first job, where I hated my job. I'm not going to say the job. I hated my job. And I told my mom, I'm leaving. She said, it's just a week. And I said, yeah, I'm leaving. There's nothing to do, you know, I'm most of the time doing nothing. It's my first week. She said, Noura, the job, you need to chase it. Just chase it. And I think we chased it. We chased work. We chased things to be better. and I learned to do yoga. So that was a good personal
That's a great
you know,
learning.
balance in terms of the work and the well-being. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for those, and both great insights, and it's a great note to end on. So from the vision stage, we've talked about everything from Churchill and starting to paint from the age of 40, who was really inspired by Morocco and used to go often to Marrakesh because he loved the light there to paint, to yoga, but also the idea that there is incredible pace of change happening for the creative industry here in the UAE. And again, I think globally there has been questions about how creative industries can survive through the pandemic. Incredible technological changes, even if we were challenged today and couldn't have His Excellency Dr. Ahmed, but still incredible how we're able to connect with those of you who are participating online. But importantly, that these changes, important infrastructure being laid in terms of legislation, in terms of providing the space, in terms of education, but most importantly, having the leadership and the vision from the vision stage to make these things happen. So congratulations. Thank you for hosting us in this incredible event, and thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for participating with us today.
Thank you.